Hello and welcome everyone. A very good evening. A new episode of Money Means Business. Today we are going to cover many economic and political events which took place in the past 7 days, and some of them took place yesterday and today. In specific, President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi received EU President Ursula von der Leyen, and they tackled a number of important issues and issues of mutual concern, as the EU Commissioner hailed the Egyptian efforts in its serious efforts and attempts to settle the situation in Gaza and the humanitarian aid flowing to Gaza through Egypt and by Egypt. Also, the IMF considers increasing Egypt's loan program amid the Gaza war, and these were statements released by the International Monetary Fund chief, Kristalina Georgieva, as the whole situation requires a lot of efforts to be exerted on the ground. The situation in Gaza is not only having its negative repercussions on Gaza or the Palestinian territories, but also on the neighboring countries, on the Middle East, and I think also on the whole world. There was also many activities by Prime Minister Dr. Mustafa Madbouli, whether today witnessing the launch of new convoys to reach Gaza, inshallah, and the Egyptian efforts to guarantee sustainable flow of aid to our Gazans brothers and sisters in this very critical time of their life, and the crisis which is continuing for the seventh consecutive week with the Israeli brutal aggression on Gaza and the martyrdom of nearly 12,500 people. Also, there was a tour by the Premier in many of the factories taking place, built in El Ashr min Ramadan and 6th of October cities. All this and more in our episode. But we are going to start with a very important event which was hosted by Egypt recently. It's the ITAF, or the Intra-African Trade Fair. Well, the first edition of the fair was held also here in Egypt in 2018. The second edition was held in Durban, South Africa in 2021. And the fair returned back to Egypt in 2023. President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi honored the event, witnessing some of its activities as he was accompanied by a number of African presidents, heads of government, top executives, media figures, businessmen, new entrepreneurs, you name it. We are going to live with this important event, and then we are going to return back to start our special episode of Money Means Business. Welcome back. As we said, we are going to cover a number of events, and on top of the list is the meeting of President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi with visiting European Commissioner Ursula von der Leyen to shed more light on the visit and to shed more light on the important topics which were discussed and the statements released by von der Leyen after her talks with the head of state. We are very much delighted to have with us via phone Mrs. Sahar Damaty, our financial expert. Thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you. Thank you.
And let's start, as I said, with this important visit by Ursula von der Leyen, where she had talks with President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi. And before the talks, she already went to Rafah and she witnessed herself the efforts exerted by Egypt to facilitate the entry of aid to the Gaza Strip, and also to witness not only the obstacles in front of the aid convoys made by the Israeli occupation forces and Israeli authorities, but also all the efforts exerted by Egypt in general, whether receiving the patients, the injured, all those in need of help from the Palestinian strip, or other efforts by the state. Before going into these details, Mrs. Damaty, how do you see the timing of the visit of von der Leyen and the importance of her visit to Rafah and then the talks with the head of state?
Well, actually, I believe that Egypt has witnessed, has been receiving a lot of very important visits from the States, from Germany, different countries in the world, and lately the EU convoy. I think it's quite important, and it's because they do understand the efforts that is exerted by Egypt, not only for the relief of aid or receiving the injured Palestinians or evacuating, as a matter of fact, the foreign nationals. Mm-hmm. So they can see the efforts exerted by Egypt, and it was it was important that they discuss with the president of the country the major point about how can you bring peace in the country and the borders, and the country and the borders, which is only through one solution, is the two-state solutions.
Amen to that. And I'm asking this because in many statements released by released by her in the press conference, she said that all the efforts exerted, all what was achieved on the ground, all the convoys which reached Gaza already, none of this would be possible without the excellent and close cooperation with the Egyptian authorities and, of course, the UNRWA or the UN Refugee Agency, and in addition, of course, to the Egyptian volunteers, the Red Crescents, and noting, of course, that the EU is the biggest donor to the Gaza Strip. If you want to elaborate more on that.
Yes, I mean, it's important that they witnessed that, and they understood one very important point, that most of the aid that is going to the Palestinians is coming from Egypt. Mm-hmm. So actually, in spite of the fact that there are a lot of international organizations, including the EU, the humanitarian convoy, they do send aid. But Egypt represents around 70 to 80% of the total aid going to the Palestinians and the injured. So I think that was very, very important for her to witness this, and also to see the difficulties that the Egyptians incur in order to get the aid inside the Gaza area, and how long it takes. Because as a matter of fact, I mean, the 2 million Palestinians living in such a horrendous and impossible situation.
And more than 1 million now are displaced in their own territories. I'm asking also about this because this is going to lead us to other statements released by the IMF president, by Kristalina Georgieva, as she said that the IMF considers increasing Egypt's loan program amid the Gaza war. Simply, the Gaza war, it's really having its negative impacts on the whole world, and particularly the neighboring countries, namely Egypt and Jordan. How do you see these statements released recently by Georgieva?
Well, it's very logical. Egypt, as a matter of fact, and the neighboring country are suffering a lot because, number one, I mean, we're again, for the second time after the Ukrainian-Russian war, we are witnessing again increase in energy prices substantially, while Egypt currently is suffering from lack of foreign resources. This war is affecting very much the level of tourism, hence the FX revenues. So from this perspective, you cannot achieve all the major issues requested by the IMF during the first approval of the 3 billion under these conditions. Mm-hmm. From this perspective, they have recognized and understood the fact that unless they increase this, they cover the deficit, the financial deficit that exists currently in the budget of the country. They have to increase the aid.
And what she said was echoing what was released last week. Last week, the S&P Global Rating Agency expressed concerns about the Israeli war's impact on foreign tourism to neighboring countries, including Egypt. Is this related to that in a way?
And of course, it's all related because, end of the day, one of the major problems of Egypt, or you have two major problems in Egypt economically. Number one is inflation, of course, which is fueled continuously by the devaluation of the currency, and also the currency issue. Hence, you cannot start with the implementation of the proper plan in order to cure the economy while you have war at the border and a decrease in tourism revenues, which is very, very important for Egypt. You have to protect the area because of the Suez Canal and the vessels that are traveling through the Suez Canal. All of this has an impact, plus also the needed money in order to cover for the substantial increase of the petroleum prices and the energy prices.
Well, I don't know why when I was reading all that, all this reminded me of the Minister of Finance, Dr. Mohammed Ma'it, when he called on the international economic bodies and the rating agencies put into consideration the surrounding circumstances before evaluating or giving rates to particularly developing countries. I mean, I cannot separate the negative repercussions 3 years ago of COVID-19 and 2 years ago, nearly 2 years ago, of the Russian-Ukrainian crisis on the supply chains and food security, you name it, and the energy crisis also. Now also the Israeli aggression on Gaza and its repercussions should also taken into consideration. Do you find that these statements, which were released months ago by His Excellency, the Minister of Finance, are echoed now on the ground or taken into account?
Yes, of course. There is one thing I would like to add that he said, which I believe is very important, is that the substantial increase in the debt service. First of all, the debt service of Egypt is not that huge. We're talking 165 billion. By comparison to our GDP, it's considered acceptable relative to other countries also in the world. But the problem is in the servicing of the debt because the Federal Reserve and the U.S., they kept on increasing interest continuously in order to curb their inflation. But this has very negative effects on different markets, including Egypt, because it led to increase in the interest rate on the foreign currency across all our debt. So that was one of our main problems, in addition to the fact that the increase in the prices, as you mentioned, of the commodities, of the energy, of the slowdown of the supply chains, transportation, all of these had a very significant effect on Egypt. And
well,
hence,
yeah. Yes.
Yeah. And now, if we add to this also the new war that is taking place in Gaza and its impact on the level of tourism, which was the major revenue stream up to the first half of 2023, they definitely, all of this has very bad impact economically.
And the winter season is our peak by all means. One final question, Mrs. Damaty. The IMF said it's still considering the increase of Egypt's loan program. As a financial expert, you are with or against?
I am with it, provided they provide us with the financial gap to enable us.
We hope
to
that
pass
all this
legislation.
is going to end soon and we are not going to lose any more innocent lives. Mrs. Sahar Damaty, our financial expert, thank you very much for your input, ma'am, and have a very good evening. Right after the
Thank
short
you.
break, we are going to return back with more, so stay tuned.
موطني الجلال والجمال والسناء والبهاء في رباك في رباك والحياة والنجاة والهناء والرجاء في هواك في هواك هل أراك سالما منعما وغانما مكرما سالما منعما وغانما مكرما هل أراك في علاك تبلغ السماء تبلغ السماء موطني
Welcome back, and we are going to continue with the main events which took place today as Egypt is continuing its utmost efforts to continue with guaranteeing the delivery of aid to the Palestinians in Gaza. And the convoys today, they reached 199 trucks with all what you can ever imagine: dried food, canned food, sanitary packages, medicines, drugs, blankets, daily life things. I mean, everything. And we are going to continue with doing that because this is our duty and we are not going to give up. We are not going to stop supporting our brothers in Gaza. But there is another topic we are going to tackle now with our dear guest via phone, Dr. Zainab Nawar, Professor of Economics. Thank you very much for being with us, Dr. Zainab.
Hello, my dear. Hello, my dear. Thank
Dr.
you so
Zainab,
much.
it's very important.
It's my pleasure to be with you.
Thank you, ma'am. It's very important to remind ourselves and to play this positive role as media outlets to speak about the efforts exerted by the state to develop Sinai. Sinai, it's not only South Sinai with the wonderful beaches we have, it's not only the wonderful Red Sea resort of Sharm el-Sheikh or Dahab or Nuweiba. No, Sinai is a source of pride for all of us because of its wealth, because of the natural resources. And in fact, developing Sinai, it's our duty. How do you see, in general, before going into details, the efforts exerted by the state to develop this dear part of our country?
Yes, of course, we have actually, we have a lot of efforts that had been exerted. We're not talking about Sinai and developing Sinai. Actually, before President Fattah al-Sisi came into power, actually, Sinai and the development of Sinai was not of that much interest, fortunately to say so, before in earlier times. But once the President Fattah al-Sisi came into, of course, came into power, and he said that it's very important to develop Sinai and it's in this precious part of Egypt. And also, people of Sinai and the Bedouin who used to live in Sinai used to have a lot of problems. But we can say that since 8 or 10 years now, there are a lot of projects, comprehensive and reform and big projects also for Sinai and for the Bedouin of Sinai, starting from developing a lot of sports villages there, the Bedouin houses, also the irrigation canals to also what we can say that work on the agricultural production and the agricultural capacity of different agricultural products also in Sinai. If you are thinking about linking Sinai with the rest of Egypt through different tunnels and through different roads, and also this is very important because we used to have Sinai as what we can say in certain times, we used to have Sinai that there is no connections with the rest of the governorate, which is very important to have these huge connections between Sinai
This
and the
was
rest
my
of the
common
governorate.
question, Dr. Zainab, because Sinai is not that far anymore. With the tunnels
No, it's not,
connecting
no.
Sinai to the delta, with the infrastructure, with the network of roads and access, Sinai is not that far. How do you see focusing on the infrastructure mega projects before going into Sinai itself and to build new cities? I mean, now we can hear easily about new smart cities and new cities to be built in central Sinai, in the new Rafah city, you name it.
Yes, of course. Yes, this is very important. New cities now in Sinai, so you are just trying to work on what we can say attracting, in addition to the Bedouin living in Sinai, you're attracting also citizens from different governorates to go and to work in Sinai, and also to start different economic activities in Sinai. When you talk about projects, when you talk about industrial projects, when you talk about agricultural production in Sinai, so you are trying to attract different citizens from different places in Egypt to go and to work and to live also in Sinai. Sinai has a great potential in terms of resources, agricultural resources, industrial, and also mineral resources.
Sure.
So all of the effort that had been done and still working on the ground, you are trying to, what we can say, use these resources that was not used before. And also you are trying to fight terrorism, fight poverty there. Once you will have a reform, once you will have a development for this precious land of Egypt. So definitely you are like dealing with a lot of social problems that used to be there. So yes, we have a lot of achievement that had been done in the time of the President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi actually, and a lot of effort and a lot of connections and a lot of resources now are being used, and a lot of also of future projects for Sinai.
Yes, and when it comes to services, it's also there. I mean, it's now very easy to hear that there is or there are plans to establish a university in a tour, for example. So to have educational service, health service, new communities, and as we do say that build it and they'll come. And as you've kindly mentioned, the strategy of the state was to fight terrorism via development and the security solution, both in parallel, both coinciding with each other, hand in hand. How do you see also the establishment of many universities there, in addition to the schools, of course, to make sure that the new communities are, we do have comprehensive services introduced to their residents?
Yes, yeah. I'm sorry to tell you that in earlier times, and sometimes before this type of development, a comprehensive development occurred in Sinai, because they went to Sinai maybe in St. Catherine. This was at the year, I think it was 2006, 2007, where I went there. At that time, there wasn't any school for that time. People of the tribe, the name of the tribe named Gabaliya, they have to walk long distance to reach the schools. This is why they prohibited girls to go to schools, and then they only said that boys, they will go to school because of this long walk that they do. At the time when I went to Sinai, this was also because I had lived with one of the tribes there for a while, working on a developmental project there. Also in terms of health services, they have it on a minimum level. But now, if we can imagine that for this new type of project and the provision of healthcare services to the Bedouin of Sinai, of course, this will increase the level of what we can say the development of the people, the type of services that would be provided for them, especially for education and especially for health. And this will have a reflection on their standard of living. Bedouin of Sinai used to be poor before. Bedouin of Sinai, they didn't have the sufficient services also before. But now when we are talking about healthcare, education, and also universities, of course, this adds a lot to people living there, and also this will be a source
And
of
all type
attraction
of
for
universities, meaning
for
public
different
universities,
citizens.
private universities, I mean, you name it, because the geography or the nature of Sinai needs a specific kind of education. For example, as you've kindly mentioned, mining. So we need a faculty very much specialized in that to make sure that the graduates are going to work in that and be qualified cadres and qualified cadres to lead this branch of industry, for example. But Dr. Zainab, I'd like to speak in numbers, if you permit me. Regarding the economic development plan for Sinai, Egypt spent more than 750 billion pounds in development projects in Sinai over the past 10 years alone. And when it comes to the total government investments in this plan 2023-2024, about 6.5 billion pounds, of which the public treasury finances about 44.6%. How do you see these numbers? Because simply the sky is our limit.
Yes, of course, the numbers, it tells a lot. The numbers, it tells that actually there is what we can say a lot in terms of amount of money that will be pumped into these projects and the development projects of Sinai. So reading these numbers, it will tell us to what extent that actually the government and the President of Fattah al-Sisi actually is paying a lot of attention to Sinai and giving Sinai what we can say, what should have been provided to Sinai in terms of development and developmental projects. Still, we need a lot for Sinai. Still, we need a lot of also more of development to Sinai. But actually, what had been done on the ground during this time are so great in terms of the provision of different services and also the enhancement and the development also and the developmental project that we started to witness there. So yes, the readings of number are so great, and we still need more for Sinai.
We need more, and we are already planning for more. And in very recently, Prime Minister Dr. Mustafa Madbouli was in Sinai, touring North Sinai, and he was accompanied by a large number of top officials, top executives, media figures, businessmen, and investors, by the way. And he said in the press conference that simply it's our Sinai and it's our duty to continue on the development path. And we do not have, I'm not going to say unfortunately, but simply we are in a race against time. We do not have the luxury of wasting time. And when it comes to agriculture, there are a lot of potentials, particularly in North Sinai, to reclaim millions. I'm not here saying thousands or even tens of thousands, but millions of fedans in Sinai. Do you see that this is the future of agriculture of Egypt, in addition to the new Delta and Toshka?
Yes, it could be, of course. Yes, definitely. Yes, we have a lot of what you can say agricultural products that also we can export from Sinai. When we talk about what we do have, the type of lands in Sinai, it will have this type of what I can say virgin lands. I'm sorry to tell you so. So definitely we'll have this type of fruits and this type of vegetables that will be so healthy also. And also we can export this type of agricultural production to outside Egypt, to the rest of the world, of course. Yes, we have a potential in terms of agriculture in Sinai, and it would be a great opportunity. Yes, the time is a stressing factor, especially that what we can say, this increase in international prices and all of this costs that we do pay in terms of the government for the development and developmental projects. So if we work on a speedy manner, this will also save a lot, and also this will allow us to use the resources better, and also we can benefit from export some of these agricultural products outside and getting more of a dollar and all of this.
And
Yes,
regarding
it
the
could be.
industrial sector or regarding the new entrepreneurs, the new investors, I think that now there is a bundle of incentives introduced by the state to make it easier for them by all means. But your duty or your homework is to think out of the box, to invade new markets, to come out with new innovative ideas. Then you are going to find your place, and particularly in Sinai. How do you see the incentives introduced by the state to encourage new investors to invest in Sinai and to have their own projects there?
Yes, of course, the government had gave those investors who would like to invest in Sinai a lot of, I can say, of benefits and a lot of incentives, because this is partially, this is what the government used to do, to encourage the reform and the development for these places, because once again, working in Sinai, starting a new project in Sinai, maybe it will not be an easy task for the entrepreneur or for the businessman. This is why the Prime Minister just had a lot of visits and started to talk with the businessmen, and in order to market for the potential of business in Sinai. Yes, it will be a lot of work, a lot of hard work from the businessmen themselves, but of course, the support of the government that the government would give to these businessmen would be quite important and would be quite beneficial to encourage them to start their business in Sinai. We had a lot of also examples of Egyptian businessmen who started their work in Sinai, and also it was very successful. So we have a lot of models to show to the rest of those who would like to start their work and to start their business in Sinai.
Professor Zainab Nawar, Professor of Economics, thank you very much for your input. Have a very good evening. Right after the short break, we are going to return back with more, so stay tuned. Prime Minister Dr. Mustafa Madbouli had an inspection tour which took him to different factories in Al Ashr min Ramadan and the 6th of October industrial zones. Let me say so, but, because there you were going to find an industrial revolution and in all fields. And he met with the CEOs and the engineers on duty in these different factories to shed more light on the tour. We are very much delighted to have with us via phone Mr. Osama Murad, our economic expert. Thank you very much for being with us, sir.
Thank you for having me on the show.
Prime Minister Madbouli had talks with many of those on duty in different factories today, and he spoke with them about all the obstacles on the way, about what they do need, what are the most important things or problems they have to solve it together and on the spot. How do you see the field tours of the Prime Minister and his dialogues with different let's say, partners in our industrial development?
This is extremely important and has been neglected for a while. And definitely the war in Gaza makes us more realize the importance of urbanizing and modernizing Sinai. And it is one of the main duties of the Prime Minister to make such visits. And he did very well today to giving confidence to investors and giving Egypt's view on welcoming investors and continuing business as usual, regardless of any issues in Gaza or elsewhere. So this has been an extremely important and fruitful visit.
Let's say some of the statements released by the Prime Minister and you comment on them, sir, if you permit me.
Yes, sure.
He asserted the state's keenness to deepen the industry of the local product and encourage and empower the private sector.
I cannot agree more. Actually, the boycott has showed us, the boycott some people have done, showed us the importance of such turning to local products. And it is in the benefit of the local production, the upgrade, the modernization, and it's also important for attracting foreign investors to be here and not to export products, especially that Egypt has a shortage in foreign exchange, so local products are of extreme importance to us now.
Yeah. In one of the companies, which is an Italian company, a specialist in manufacturing adhesives and chemical products, the Prime Minister asserted that he is going to follow himself the continuous contacts between the factory and the cabinet in case of having any obstacles to eliminate them immediately and on the ground.
This is fabulous, and it's a great step in terms of shortcomings which are actively here. And the President himself has issued several decrees granting golden licenses and making sure and giving the government a mandate to solve investor problems until the regulatory framework has been done on the ground for everybody.
Yes. In another dialogue with some officials in a pharmaceutical company, this time it was in Al-Ashar min Ramadan, Prime Minister Madbouli asserted there are presidential directives to continue work to attain self-sufficiency and strengthen the different industries with a special focus on modern pharmaceutical industries.
Yes, this has been stated several times by the President, and it is extremely good for the industry. And no country can achieve 100% local satisfaction, but we can increase our portion, we can increase exports, and I think the next stage will be that we gear the industry up to export-oriented industry, not only satisfying the local demand and market.
Yeah. He also said that there are steps taken on the ground to turn Egypt into a pharmaceutical industries hub and to be a gateway for the export of pharmaceutical products to the African continent and to Arab region in general.
Indeed, they are, and there is a project about a new medical city which will host a lot of the medical industry, state-of-the-art, and Egypt is also embarking on producing the components, not only the final products now. So we're a new era. We're having the plasma collection point, which is also something new. So several issues on the medical side, which have been a strong focus by the government and the President, and issued decrees for lots of them, as the constituents, the Egyptian people, need those in the current time.
Well, Prime Minister Madbouli, this time also in another factory, this time it's for paints, he said that he asserted presenting different means of support to contribute to new expansion of this factory in addition to other factories and to work on increasing production and exports. I mean, it's not only to hail what's going on the ground, but to encourage the the private sector or different factors to expand their activities and to move on with invading new markets.
Yes, I think this was extremely important because the paints industry is a lucrative industry for Egypt. We have several local and international players. The market is growing. The export market is also extremely lucrative for the paints industry. And we're upgrading our port in Sinai, around Sinai, and on the Suez Canal zone. So it is of extreme benefit to the industry, and there is a strong focus on the construction industry, building materials, which receive top priority and are set as strategic industries in Vision Egypt 2030, as well as in the strategy paper.
Mr. Osama, one final question regarding the unemployment. I mean, all what we talked about is saying that we are fighting unemployment with development on the ground, with building new factories, with considering the private sector as such a strategic partner in development. How do you see this, and how do you see taking into consideration that qualifying new cadres and qualify the youth to lead their own projects is now a priority?
Well, we have been very successful in keeping unemployment at a historical low, despite Corona, despite Ukraine invasion, despite Gaza. Unemployment is at the low 7%. However, we still need to do a lot to attract entrepreneurs and young people to establish their own projects. We've been successful so far in the bigger industry. The government has mandated several ministers, as well as MESMEDA, the Authority for Small, Medium and Micro Enterprise, to grow this. The President has issued several competitions and issues to promote youth in developing applications, entrepreneurial spirit, and so on. But there is still need to be on the ground for implementation.
Mr. Osama Murad, our economic expert, thank you very much for your input, sir. And by this, we come to the end of our episode. Stay tuned on Nile TV International always for more updates, and for more details, please log on to www.nileinternational.net. Many thanks for watching. This was Nermeen Abdurrahman.